Classic Roman society was defined by gravitas, a concept that demanded rigid emotional control, strict military discipline, and an obsession with public dignity. At its core, it was a system built on the absolute authority of the father. Yet, at the center of the city, there were priests who looked like this, figures in saffron robes and heavy makeup, spinning in circles to the deafening clash of metal cymbals. These priests sought religious ecstasy through a public act of self-mutilation, castration. In a city where a man's status was tied to his lineage and physical integrity, this was an inversion of every traditional Roman law. This cult wasn't a secret underground movement. It was an official state religion, invited into the capital by the Roman Senate during the darkest years of the Republic. By 205 BCE, the Carthaginian general Hannibal had been ravaging Italy for over a decade. Combined with a series of failed harvests and terrifying meteor showers, the Roman Senate concluded that their own gods had abandoned them. They turned to the Sibylline books, ancient, prophetic scrolls used only in times of extreme crisis. The books offered a single, bizarre instruction. To drive Hannibal out of Italy, Rome had to fetch the Great Mother of the Gods from her sanctuary in Asia Minor. When the goddess finally arrived at the mouth of the Tiber, she wasn't a marble statue of a motherly figure. She was a jagged, black meteoric stone. History records that shortly after the stone reached the Palatine Hill, the famine ended. A few years later, Hannibal was defeated at the Battle of Zama. The Senate had their victory, and the cult of the Great Mother had its proof of power. In their rush to secure a military savior, the Senate prioritized immediate survival over long-term cultural compatibility. They had imported a goddess whose rituals they would spend the next several centuries trying to contain. Once the war ended, the Great Mother's worship became a problem for Roman authorities. The goddess demanded a level of frenzied public emotion that horrified the traditionalist Senate. The response was a series of strict legal prohibitions. No Roman citizen, not even a slave, was permitted to castrate themselves in the goddess's honor, and no citizen was allowed to serve as her priest. To fill the gap, Rome imported the Galli, foreign eunuch priests from Phrygia. By undergoing castration, these men severed their ties to family, inheritance, and traditional Roman masculine identity. This created a unique class of people in the city, social outsiders who were mocked for their effeminate appearance, yet legally inviolable because they served a state-sanctioned goddess. The Senate restricted their movements to a specific sanctuary on the Palatine Hill. For most of the year, the Galli were kept behind these walls, allowed to parade through the streets and beg for money only during the annual festival of the Megalasia. This system allowed Rome to keep the goddess's perceived protection while isolating her priesthood from the general population. By the imperial era, the cult's influence had reached the highest levels of the Roman elite. Wealthy citizens sought the rebirth promised by the goddess, but they still faced the legal ban on self-mutilation. These stone altars record the emergence of a high-status loophole, the taurobolium. It was an expensive, visceral animal sacrifice that allowed the participant to achieve initiation without breaking the law. The ritual required an elaborate physical setup. An initiate would descend into a deep earthen trench, which was then covered by a wooden lattice. Above them, on the surface, a massive bull was led onto the platform. The priests would perform a substitution sacrifice. By offering the bull's testicles to the goddess in place of their own, the Roman citizen could satisfy the deity's requirement for castration while keeping their own body intact. The climax of the ritual was the slaughter. As the bull's throat was cut, a torrent of hot blood rained through the 1,000 holes in the lattice. The initiate below would turn their face upward, ensuring the blood covered their clothes, their skin, and their tongue. By funding this slaughter, the wealthy literally bought a ritual bypass, spending the price of a bull to experience the cult's most extreme form of purification. When the initiate climbed out of the pit, drenched from head to toe in blood, they were celebrated as someone who had passed through death. The theological promise was total. The blood of the bull was believed to wash away the sins of the past and provide a direct path to a blessed afterlife. This wasn't a temporary cleansing. On altars discovered across the empire, participants used a specific phrase to describe their state, in aeternum renatus, reborn for eternity. For Rome's upper class, the blood pit became a coveted status symbol, a ticket to spiritual security that was as much about wealth as it was about faith. Over time, the state worked to normalize the goddess. They rebranded the Great Mother as an ancestral Trojan figure, placing her within the family tree of Rome's legendary founders. This sculpture shows the result: the wild goddess of the black stone smoothed into a dignified Roman matron. Despite their reputation for rigid legalism, the Romans proved surprisingly willing to bend their own rules to accommodate the rituals of a foreign deity. Rome's history is a record of pragmatic adaptation. When faced with extinction, the city assimilated the alien and the chaotic, transforming a foreign cult into a pillar of the Roman soul.